Well, hello. I'm headed east on Highway 200, kind of like I was as in my video over Prairie School. And sorry if you heard that. That was a mess. But anyway, I'm headed toward a town called Turtle Lake, North Dakota. I lived in Turtle Lake for 3 years, starting, what was it, fall of 2002? Or 2003, somewhere in there. Anyway, I lived there for 3 years. I was a teacher there. I was the only teacher. I taught, or not the only teacher, I was the only science teacher. I taught everything science grades 7 through 12. And I look back now and I say, how did you do that? But then again, this year I had 5 different preps, so there is that. But it's a lot for a new teacher to take on. So one of these days I'll have to go back to my first North Dakota teaching job up in, well, another town and talk about my adjustments there. But yeah, so this was my second full-time job in North Dakota. And so I'd been teaching for 3 years. It's, well, a little more than 3 years, but not much more. Very short amount of time. So at least I had some idea of the direction I wanted to go, even if I hadn't quite figured out how to go that direction yet. So I wasn't a new teacher when I came to Turtle Lake. And I wanted a change for reasons which I won't bore you with. So anyway, I first came down to Turtle Lake from the north. And it was just awful driving conditions. The road was so slippery. There's snow everywhere. Ice. Pretty miserable. Got to the school. Couldn't quite tell which door to go in. The actual, and it doesn't look like it now. The school looks very different now. But the actual front of the school doesn't look like a front door. So that was interesting. But anyway, I had interviewed with the superintendent. The principal was nowhere to be seen. Superintendent seemed mystified that he wasn't there, but when I mentioned that to the principal when I finally met him that fall when I moved there, he said, well, yeah, he gave me a different day for your interview. And he kind of thought the superintendent wanted to check me out himself. I never actually did work for that superintendent because he ended up quitting his job that spring. So when I started, I was a new teacher. We had a brand new superintendent, and the principal had been there, of course. Principal was quite young. He was actually just a year or two older than me. But it was interesting. The school itself had around 180 kids, K through 12, so less than half the size of the one where I teach now. The town was around 600 people, maybe a little fewer. Had a little bit more going on than the town I'd been in before. Still had a surviving Main Street and everything. So I was pretty pleased with it. It seemed like a good step up. I rented well, you'll see the house. I later on bought it. But I rented a nice little old 1920s bungalow type house. I don't remember what my rent was. But I later on bought it for $10,000, and we'll pass by where it was. The house no longer exists. It's been torn down. But yeah, $10,000. Turtle Lake is supported by, it's an hour from Bismarck. It's an hour from Minot. So that's two of the big cities in North Dakota. It's really not on a crossroads or on a major highway. It's kind of tucked away on its own. And a lot of people there work at the nearby coal mine or power plant over in Falkirk, which is Underwood, really. Sadly, or maybe not so sadly, I don't know, but definitely devastating for this part of North Dakota, that coal plant will be shutting down. And all those hundreds of jobs will be gone. And why is it shutting down? The natural gas is a lot cheaper. There are other power sources. Coal is just not an economical power source anymore. I'm turning north here on Highway 41, which takes you right past Turtle Lake, comes out in a town called Velva, and then it actually is an interesting drive north of Velva too. I haven't been on that drive since before I got a dash cam, but it is an interesting drive. But anyway, it's all shutting down, and it's all economic. The power plant exists to make money in the end, and they're not making money doing this coal thing anymore. That's been a big deal in some other states, a much bigger deal in some other states, like West Virginia, for example. So I don't know what that's going to do to towns like Turtle Lake and Underwood and so on. I know part of why I left Turtle Lake is I wanted to get somewhere larger because I wasn't sure if Turtle Lake would be around when I retired. That's just kind of the fate of small schools. Rural America is emptying out. I did a whole video series about it a couple of years ago, anyway, and I just kind of saw the writing on the wall. Now I will say, after I left, Turtle Lake had a bit of a renaissance. Uh, Part of it was due to the flooding in Minot and just people moving out of Minot, but here's a place they can live. It's a decent town, decent school, and it's cheap. Part of it had to do a massive wave of retirements over at the power plant and the coal mine. And so, those are all people that helped the enrollment in Turtle Lake actually go up. You'll see when we go by the school that it actually has an addition on it, which took me by surprise. I didn't see it coming. I Yeah, it does not look like the town I lived in. And like I said, my house has been torn down. I'm not sure why. So here we are coming up on Turtle Lake. Now, Turtle Lake is known for its turtle races. They host the national and international turtle races. And outside town, I can't remember if I went in by it in this video, but right at somewhere around this entrance is a giant 10-ton metal turtle sculpture, which is kind of neat, although the local kids are a little bitter about it because there's no pool in the town, but there's a giant, yeah, you can barely make it out there. But there's a giant turtle. So they feel a little cheated, but what they do is they paint a big circle, start the turtles in the middle of the circle, and then the first one to get to the edge of the circle wins. Of course, the turtles are all painted turtles that they pick up out. Well, I hate to even think about that. These poor turtles are living their life, and then some kid's like, hey, I'm going to race him. And so then they don't get taken back to wherever they were living, so who knows where they get dumped. So some dark side to the turtle races I don't want to think about too hard. But there's a few churches in Turtle Lake. I forget what they all are now. Like that white one we just passed, I don't remember what it is. Some of them are abandoned. That one's fixed up, that gray one there. That one closed when I was living there, so it looks like somebody's turned it into a house. And then there was a Catholic church there. There's a Methodist church, a Lutheran church, and I actually lived right next door to the Baptist church. Here we're coming up on Main Street. Like I said, it's a nice, healthy-ish Main Street for a town this size. All the businesses are still there. Drugstore, hardware store, the bowling alley. I'm not sure if that's still open, but it was when I lived there. Here's the grocery store. That's a new business over there. I don't know what it is. And there were some empty storefronts too. There still are. But yeah, just a nice, pleasant-looking little town. That's one thing that struck me driving around it. Now that I live out west, the towns out here don't look the same as central North Dakota. They're often not quite as tidy. The buildings are a little newer, and they're definitely a lot drier, a lot fewer trees. So it's a different world out here in the west. So it was kind of fun going back to Turtle Lake and seeing it again. And this video, mostly we're just going to drive around Turtle Lake. I'll talk about some of my memories. I actually do have notes here. Where did I put them? That I was going to follow. So maybe I should actually look at my outline here. I'll just mention that in Turtle Lake is when I bought the Camry that I drive. The Camry that's now 20 years old. But back when I bought it, it was only 4 years old. So that gives you an idea how long ago it was. So here we are going up the street where I lived. I could see the water tower from my house because I'm basically across the street. Actually, it's right across the street from this Tasty Freeze, which is no longer open. I lived the next house past this yellow one here, and it's gone. Gone! And there's the Baptist church. So I'm going to pause here, just show you a couple of pictures. This is what Main Street looked within a week or two of when I first moved there. This is my house. We had a wind the night I moved in there that blew a tree down right in front of my house. And luckily it blew it that way, not into the house. There's the back of the house. There's a bad picture of inside the house. And we're going to see another bad picture. Yep, there's the other bad picture of... I liked the front porch had been made part of the living room, so I liked that. That tree was too close to the house and should have come out, but I liked it, so I left it. But here we are, just continuing up. It was called Eggert Street. I better not tell that story. That's identifying somebody else. But anyway, it's Eggert Street. And just a very nice place to live in a lot of ways. If you don't mind small town living, small town everything. Because, I talk about how small town I am now. You should have seen this is small town. But one of the things that shocked me, my previous position, I'd gone in replacing kind of a nightmare. And in Turtle Lake, I wasn't replacing a nightmare, but I was replacing quite a surprising, is that a good way to put it? Quite a surprising situation. Oh, here's the hospital coming up, which is still open. I actually was an EMT in Turtle Lake during the time I was teaching there. But anyway, Turtle Lake hadn't had a science teacher in a few years. They'd actually farmed out the science department amongst several of their staff, and back then you could get away with that a little more easily than you can now. And I think they were looking to the future that, we won't be able to do this indefinitely. Because the VOAG teacher taught some science. They had the Title I teacher who went on to be a elementary teacher, taught the junior high science. They had the principal teaching a couple of science classes. He actually was a certified science teacher. So that actually made sense. But it was just farmed out amongst all these different people who really weren't science teachers other than him, and he was busy principaling, so that makes it a little more difficult. So they just decided, you know what? We need a science teacher at this school. This is ridiculous that we don't have a science teacher. So they hired me. And so we're coming up on the school here. I'm going to share a few more photographs, but see, this is where I was a little surprised because that brick part didn't exist when I moved there. The yellow part did. That's the old elementary school. When I was there, they had kindergarten, first and second grade there. Yeah, see, that's what the school looked like when I was hired there. The addition comes out between those bushes toward the front. That had been abandoned, but was standing there as an abandoned building connected to the part where they're doing the elementary classes. And this is, my classroom was in this end of the building. One of my surprises, that's my classroom. I've never before or since been in a carpeted classroom. Or I shouldn't say carpeted classroom. Carpeted science lab. Dumb idea. I don't know why they did it. That school is all carpeted, including the science room. And I don't like carpet, especially high traffic. It was carpet tiles. You can rip one out and put another one in. But still, especially in a science lab. Dumb. Okay, I guess I'm just contrasting how it looks now to how it looked back then. It was very overgrown with bushes around the front back then. I liked it, shaded. I had no air conditioning, so it helped keep my room cool, but still. Also very a dark school. So we'll just cruise around Turtle Lake while I just mention a few things. It was shrinking when I moved there. Trying to remember, I guess I could look at my outline here. There is no motel in Turtle Lake, but there are a lot of businesses around Turtle Lake, a lot more than the town I'd lived in before. The town I'd lived in before had pretty much dried up. It's still pretty much dried up. Although they also have an addition on their school that would have been nice. Anyway, I was learning a lot when I taught here. But we're going to get a little personal here. I always say I apologize to my first students because I really had no idea what I was doing, and that's true. By the time I moved to Turtle Lake, I had a better idea where I wanted to be. Like now, I'm always trying to improve my teaching. I think at the point where I think I've got it all figured out, that might be the point when it's time to retire because I'm done growing and getting better. But and I've been told when I talk about my students, I sound like Garrison Keeler, and all my students are above average and everything, which I do, and that's one of the lessons I learned in Turtle Lake. I know the reality. I know what some of my students are going home to, the hell that they're going home to. And if you know anything about the world, you know that some of my kids are going home to hell. And they've been trapped there lately thanks to this COVID-19 thing with no escape, because school had been their escape. But what I have learned is just for the sake of my own mental health, I need to focus on the positives. And I wasn't very good at that in Turtle Lake. I was very good at being the negative, complaining person who only saw the negative. And first of all, it's no fun being around those people. So I was no fun to be around. But it's no fun being one of those people because you're around them all the time if you're one of those kind of people. So I think it was very good that I finally woke up to that when I was in Turtle Lake and saw, oh yeah, you are really negative. It's kind of like when I do finally get up to my first town, I'll talk about some of the lessons I learned there. But, kind of one of those eye-opening things where like, holy cow, this is not who I want to be. And just really started focusing more on the positives. Yeah, kids can be annoying. They're kids. I went into teaching knowing what kids are like. I'd been one for a long time. I was, at this point in my life, I was still closer in age to being a kid than to not being a kid. And that just was a important wake-up call for me. Another thing I learned at this school was, there's the Methodist Church. The importance of balancing my personal okay, sorry. Off the outline here. We're going back to the school. This is kind of the student parking lot, but this yellow building over on the left is the old gym for that old tall school that was abandoned. They kept that. It's now a community center. And actually here in the town I live now, they've done the same thing with the old gym. It's a community center. But I wanted to, for my own sake, I wanted to check out the addition a little bit more. And see, when I interviewed, I thought that was the front entrance. No, it's where you can't see it anymore, but it's where the addition juts out. So anyway, and Turtle Lake, you probably saw the sign there, is actually consolidated with nearby Mercer. All the school is in Turtle Lake now, but Mercer is part of it. So the official name of the school is Turtle Lake Mercer Public School. But anyway, one of the lessons I had to learn there was just that whole balancing personal time with work time. I am somebody who can get his teeth into a task and work really hard. And I was doing that a lot in Turtle Lake. I was writing a lot of my own curriculum because I didn't like the textbook series they had. And funny enough, I still do basically my own thing. But I was spending, and back then I didn't own a computer. So I was spending a lot of time at the school doing it. And Saturday nights, Friday nights, weeknights, just way, way, way too much time at the school. And I don't know, I think it was buying a house that woke me up to the thought that, it would be kind of nice to spend some time in this place. Bought my first computer then. That was an expensive year. Bought a computer, bought a car, bought a house. Just really started spending more time on myself and my own interests rather than school so much. And I tried to continue that to this day. I know sometimes I feel a little lazy, but you can't work all the time. You just can't. So that was a big lesson to learn there. Another fun lesson was I got involved at the state level. It's a lot easier when you're in central North Dakota than when you're in the southwest corner of North Dakota. Uh, I got involved with writing the state science standards. I I won't say they were amazing. If I could go back, there's a lot I would like to redo with them. But as part of a committee, we I don't think we really had the best guidance on what to do. But looking back, like I know our evolution standards were weak, and we were afraid to use the big E word because we were afraid of causing controversy. But my God, how do you not teach evolution in science? It's central to biology. You don't have biology if you don't have evolution. Biology just falls apart. Um, but anyway, it was good to meet other science teachers because that's one thing that had been missing in my life. I was the only science teacher. Yes, there were other teachers I could talk to about, oh, I'm having trouble with this kid, or how do I do this in my classroom. But to actually talk about science teachers and what do they do when they're teaching the same subject as me, or how do you go about managing labs or handing out equipment in a lab? Those are things that I had no guidance on, and so I that was great. Uh, Made a lot of connections there, so I almost kind of want to do that again. But now that I'm in Western North Dakota, I'm a lot more expensive to hire because they pay you mileage to get there because you're working for them. And yeah, it's not like a quick trip down for the day because I didn't even have to stay the night there because it's so quick to go back and forth. Now I have to have a motel room and everything, so I doubt I'll ever be asked to do anything like that again. But it was a very good experience. So if you have the opportunity to get onto a larger board in your profession, I strongly suggest doing that. It's just a good chance to network, good chance to see kind of the bigger level view. Anyway, to chop that off, I really valued that experience. And I valued a lot of the lessons I learned in Turtle Lake, I learned more about managing a classroom in Turtle Lake. I learned more about managing my workload. I learned more about being part of a community, and also learned a bit about saying no. It's easy to overload yourself, especially when you're a new teacher and they want to load you up with everything anyway. But I learned to say no when I lived in Turtle Lake, and I still do that. I'm still guilty of letting people put too much on me. I think when you're a teacher, that's just kind of a natural instinct that you have, but I'm better at it. One thing that struck me just rewatching this footage is how empty the streets are. Like, I don't see anybody. I think I should point out that this is actually Sunday, and you look at the time. Of course, it's in military time, so 5:33 for me. It's actually 6:33 in Turtle Lake because it's they're in Central Time. I live in Mountain Time, and my dash cam is set to Mountain Time. But so that's part of why I think there's nobody out. They're all eating supper at 6:30 or so. I don't know. Or they've settled into the house. It actually was raining a lot. In fact, my next bit of footage when I leave Turtle Lake will be interspersed with lots of rain. So I think a lot of people with their outdoor plans have been like, I don't know. So that's probably part of it. That looked like a lightning flash. That's just a weird effect of I stopped for gas, turned off the car, turned the car back on, and the camera just does that sometimes. I don't know what that was about. But I do remember when I sat down in the car thinking, ooh, it really got darker in the time I filled up the tank. Because it was getting darker. I think you saw the storm when I was headed to the gas station. I think you saw it off in the distance. And if you didn't, don't worry. You'll get to see it. You'll be in the middle of it. Just not in today's video, but in the next one. So we're passing the grain elevator. I think every town has grain elevators. At one time, the train came to Turtle Lake, would pick up grain. That was long before I was there. There was a time when Turtle Lake had a train station. People would stop. Most of the towns in North Dakota were built along the railroad. But a lot of the railroad's been taken up. Over to your right, you can see water. And yeah, that's a feature of central North Dakota I miss. There's a lot of water everywhere. Not too many giant lakes other than, Lake Sakakawea. But definitely lots of water. And I miss that. And we have one lake near here, but it's kind of an artificial lake. You just don't run into lakes as you're driving around out here. But, central North Dakota is littered with lakes and little sloughs. And it's a very wet area. I like the drive. Actually, this is part of the footage that was lost when I had the hard drive failure a few years ago. I had a wonderful drive from Carrington down to Medina through the back roads. It was just amazingly beautiful and full of lakes. But yeah, can't get that one back. But anyway, stop dwelling on that. Get back to the topic here. So this is Turtle Lake, and we're leaving Turtle Lake on whatever this is. It meets up with Highway 41 out here. Yep, right here. And I am headed north on Highway 41 again. We'll go to. Eventually we'll come out in Velva. It's I don't know, a good 40 miles to Velva, something like that. And then another 20 miles or so from Velva over to Minot, which is the whole reason I was up here is I was taking a class in Minot, and I just decided to take this route because I hadn't really been back to Turtle Lake since I'd left. So it was fun to go back and just see the old stomping grounds or whatever the saying is. But when I said before you could see a storm off in the distance, you can see where the rain is coming down in this view. That's one of the things I've always loved about the wide open spaces out here is you can see the weather. And, when you have a storm like this, it really shows you just how big the sky is. And when you have a nice, pretty blue sky, you don't appreciate as much how big the view is as you do when there's storms somewhere else, not here. See, there's more water. By the way, we also just went over a very interesting piece of North Dakota history called the McCluskey Canal. Someday I'll have to drive you through McCluskey, which is about 20 miles east of Turtle Lake. But McCluskey Canal was an attempt to bring water from Lake Sakakawea to Fargo. So it's this canal dug across the state, and then they just kind of randomly stopped and they said, "Whoa, wait, this is stupid. There's a Red River right here in Fargo." Now the McCluskey Canal is used mostly for irrigation and stuff. But, it was quite a boondoggle. If you saw the digging over, they made like a canyon over in McCluskey just to have this canal going through it, which is interesting. So, but yeah, the McCluskey Canal went right by Turtle Lake. And, at one time, Turtle Lake, the school had more kids in it than mine does now. And it's just shrunk to nothing. And that's what's kind of going on all over rural America. So that's kind of a downer place to leave it, but I see this piece of footage is ending. So I think I've reflected enough on my days in Turtle Lake. So look forward to more time going north. And I've got a book I want to talk about. So we'll pick this up again with another book review. So thank you for listening and watching. Hope you enjoyed and got a little insight into me and my past and who I am and where I'm going. So we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.